you guys for having me. It's a pleasure being here. I'm going to go ahead and just share this clip. I don't know how many of you have watched the episodes of Beyond Skinwalker Ranch. They did a couple seasons with the Rocky Mountain Ranch, and season 3 will be coming up, and my sister will be joining me there. So I'm just going ahead and share this clip so you have a little background information on what I'll be talking about here. So, like so many of you, we all have our reasons why we get involved in researching and investigating this phenomena. And for me, and my sister, my mom worked as a key punch operator for United Airlines in the Denver Tech Center here in Colorado. And she had just recently divorced my father and started dating a gentleman named Jack. All the adults now in this situation are passed away, so I feel like I can reveal at least the first names of the family. But he owned this ranch property in Elbert County, Colorado. This is, of course, where Linda Moulton Howe got her start. The mutilations in the Midwest were just skyrocketing at the time from 1975, 76, 77, 78. Mutilations were occurring daily. These are just a few of the headlines that I found when I investigated this. But the crazy thing for me was I kind of started out in the paranormal world because I had a lot of this hitchhiker kind of things that happened that I compartmentalized and really didn't connect it to the high strangeness ranches until later Skinwalkers at the Pentagon came out and they started kind of tying all of these different things together. And I'm like, huh, maybe they are connected. I did not live on the ranch full time. I visited there on the weekends. The people who owned it, my mom's boyfriend Jack had 3 sons. The 2 youngest sons lived with us during the week so they can attend a larger school district, the Cherry Creek School District. So we would drive the boys back and forth or spend the weekends at the ranch. Some of the commonalities that, and you have to remember, like, it wasn't until the 80s when Skinwalker Ranch got its, recognition and that came out. So this is a full, decade before that. And, I joined MUFON, came in as a field investigator like many of you. And John Schuessler, who is one of the founding fathers of MUFON, I just love John. He learned of my connection to the ranch and he bestowed upon me this briefing document. And my sister, my mom, and I were just stunned because we were threatened and warned never to talk about what happened out there. I never knew anybody knew anything about it. I never knew it was investigated. And it wasn't until I bought that book, Hunt for the Skinwalker. So from there, it's just been basically a Pandora's box going. So some of the first things that were reported on the ranch was this strange humming sound, and I tried to recreate the sound to how I remember it as a young child. So if you guys can hear that, that was the first thing reported, and they would hear these hums and bangs under the ground. Of course, the cattle mutilations, which we'll get into here in a little bit more in depth, but we have, not only cow, but horse, sheep. I even found articles about dog. The strange circle on the ground, we'll talk about craft orb and UFO sightings, crypto creatures, paranormal activity. The crypto creatures were these large birds, and we'll talk about that. The menacing helicopters, we'll get into the military presence, 2 types of ETs on the property, the mysterious metal, strange disappearing boxes. We'll kind of touch on all these things, and then I'll kind of talk about what I've been investigating just recently. The one question I've always had, and I still have, is how much of this was MK Ultra Black Access military projects, and how much of this is, the unexplained UFO paranormal kind of stuff. And really, this is what this presentation is going to be about. Again, it wasn't until I bought Hunt for the Skinwalker. It's been written about in Alien Contact and Zones of Strangeness and many other books. In history, it was known as the Clearview Ranch. In in Colm Kelly, her PhD, and George Knapp's book Hunt for the Skinwalker, they say that 3 PhDs investigated the ranch. Dr. Leo Sprinkle, who was a well-known hypnotist out of Laramie, Wyoming, he was really well known in the field for, gosh, over 35 years. and such a wonderful man. And luckily for me, he lived only, 2-hour drive away to Laramie at the time. So I would drive back and forth to the archives to get all the original documents on the ranch. That kind of started. This was the original letter confirming that, yes, this was the ranch of my childhood. And Dr. Leo Sprinkle, he has over 74 boxes of material now at the American Heritage Center. I got lost in all his letters. I'd go back and just read through boxes and boxes of correspondence. And it was so cool for me because not only did people write him from around the world about their experiences, but, there's letters from Hynek and Linda Howe and all sorts of people. And the cool part was he kept all his response letters. So I got obsessed for a while, like learning how Leo Sprinkle through the decades was thinking about the phenomena. And that culminated in this book, Letters of Love and Light, because Dr. Leo Sprinkle would always sign his books, Love and Light Leo. And as you can see, these are just some sample chapters on hypnosis, sightings, abductions. There was even a really cool early Snowflake, Arizona sighting before Travis Walton. So, I found some cool gems in that in his archive. So that was just a labor of love. I just wanted to share that with you guys. It is available on Amazon, or you could go to my website and find that. But here are some early articles I found talking about Clearview. It was known as the Clearview Ranch because at the time, the police officers and the people in the community did not want this location known. They didn't want the attention to this small town. They're still kind of funny about that. So they dubbed it the Clearview Ranch. So you can kind of see some of the headlines there. Clearview is close encounter capital of the world, and on and on. Again, here's John Schuessler, the original briefing document. And so in this document, there are so many, they kind of go chronologically in order of all the different things that were experienced on the ranch. And I don't have time to talk about every single event. So what I did is I put together this little visual so you guys can kind of see what was reported on the ranch. So I'm just going to share that with you guys right now.
Impact is imminent. Impact is imminent. Impact.
So as you can see, there's like so many different things that were reported to happen out there. Some of those events have me and my big sister there, Chris. Some of them, most of them, I was not a part of. And what was fascinating for me to find out initially was here, my sister, my mom, and I thought this was kind of an isolated, events that occurred just on this ranch property. Come to find out, I have a spreadsheet, an Excel spreadsheet of over 250 people, and it really was the whole county that was experiencing things, just like the Archuleta Mesa, and out there in Utah. It's not just isolated to this ranch property. So to me, that adds credibility to what was going on there. Another thing I found fascinating to learn right off the gate is before Jack, John, and Betty bought the ranch, it sat vacant for 7 to 12 years is what's in the reports. We don't have the exact amount of time that it sat vacant, but it was vacant for so long. And I'm thinking if the military wanted to have access or control of that property, they could have just purchased it, but they did not. So I wanted to let my sister have some words and share her thoughts on this. So this is my big sister talking about what she remembers.
Focused around the ranch, and the very unusual stuff that was reportedly happening there had been neatly tucked away for years. The adults in the situation made it clear that I was not to talk to anyone about what I saw or what I overheard. Not that I probably would anyway, for fear that my friends would think I was a liar. And as far as I could tell, I, along with all the others in the house, were in constant fear, but kind of trying to just get on with daily life, sort of like pretending, nothing to see here, everything is normal. I honestly felt like we had like this massive, weighty secret thrust upon us that we couldn't tell anybody about. It wasn't until Katie told me that the events at the ranch had shown up in a book, and this just happened a few years ago, that I realized that that weighty secret that I had carried all these years had been revealed to anybody else. Now, to say I was shocked, that's an understatement. A couple of years ago, I attended one of Katie's presentations. It was fascinating to hear about what she had uncovered about the place and that whole area that were so forbidden in our earlier life. And then she played a reenactment of the actual words that were used to threaten us, the words taken directly from the initial report of the incident, which, by the way, I never even knew that it was ever reported to anyone. We never knew that until Katie saw that book, that any reports were filed or anyone else knew anything about what was happening there. Anyway, my reaction to the audio actually shocked me. My reaction was just instant fear, and I started crying as if I had been transported back in time. I still don't know the causes of what I witnessed and what the friends of the family were going through on the ranch. I do know that it impacted me and others in a deep and profound way. Now, to find out so much more about it through researchers like Katie, and to find out there are other places similar to the ranch around the country and possibly around the world, is just really fascinating. And I'm so glad this topic is becoming more widely accepted for research.
Thank you, Chris. So there we are for it will now be season 3 of Beyond Skinwalker. We thought it was going to be 2, but they moved it to 3. And here's me and my sister. That was her first time back on the ranch, and I really had to talk her into going back. She does not want the hitchhiker effect. She has not been affected by it the same way. She is one that tends to shove it down and doesn't necessarily want to face it. But I told her it'll give us some fun stories to talk about when we're older, that we faced our fears and went back to the ranch together. And so she went along with me, and I think it was very, very therapeutic for her, as she was remembering things and was able to talk about it and face things. So it was a really cool experience. And I'm looking forward to seeing how that episode comes out, because I don't see it until you guys see it. So I have no idea. They spent a week filming, and I don't know what ends up in those 44-minute episodes. One experience my sister and I shared together was, it was a typical spring day. We're out flipping the frisbee, and below our feet was this dry dirt and snow all around us. And it shocked me when I found out that it was reported in the books, or in the report. So, it says we stopped at the area where the UFO had been sighted. There was a large, perfectly round circle. There were drops of blood outside of the, on the 4 inches snow that's around it. There were drops of blood in the snow, and they measured the circle to be approximately 75 feet in diameter, which, interestingly enough, that number of 75 feet in diameter keeps coming up time and time again in other reports. Let's see here. So the scariest night on the ranch, the humming sounds started up. The brightest light came through the boys' window. It was me and the three boys and my sister hanging out. The adults, it was the boy's mother's birthday. They're playing board games and hanging out in the living room. At that time, the power goes out, and this is where that disembodied electrical sounding voice basically gave us that warning, which is in the briefing document. And I recreated it to the best of my memory. And this is what my sister was talking about when she said, when I played that reenactment of the sound, she had like a PTSD reaction to it. And here's what it sounded like. And there's the quote from the document.
Attention. We have allowed you to remain. We have interfered with your lives very little. Do not cause us to take action which you will regret. Your friends will be instructed to remain silent concerning us.
That was the threat we heard from. I mean, it sounded mechanical, electrical, all the powers out in the house. It came from every orifice of the house. My mom and Jack took that very seriously. We were not to talk about what was going on there. Now, thinking about that, I learned of something called plasma ball technology.
While Paul-
And I think it's in this presentation. I'm pretty sure that it is. But it's basically where they pipe out electrical sounding voices, and I'm wondering if they weren't experiencing or experimenting with that out on the ranch at the time. And we'll get into that in a minute. But let me share this clip here with you from season 2 here, and we'll
While
talk about
Paul
what happened.
continues to discuss.
What's really interesting about that is we went out with the drone a few months after that, and it was fully charged, and we put it up right above that site, and the battery drained within 2 minutes. And even stranger, we plugged it into the car, and it charged super fast, and we flew it again, and it was fine. So there are these weird anomalies that happen around where that snowless circle is. And in the report, it states there were 2 of these. One that my sister and I remember very clearly, and there was another one in back of the ranch house. So something that I've always wondered, how much of this is Black Access Projects? And we have some evidence to suggest that perhaps some of that was going on there. So here's this plasma ball technology. I want you guys to kind of listen to how this sounds. And to me, it's very reminiscent of that disembodied electrical voice that threatened our family. And was that a Black Access military project? And did they do that to us? Which, if they did, really makes me angry. So I want you guys to listen to this here.
Pentagon scientists have finished testing on an early weapon that can make laser plasma balls talk.
Stop, or we will be forced to fire upon you.
It's called the laser-induced plasma effect, and it's made by the Joint Non-Lethal Weapons Directorate. So what they've done is basically created a laser that can shoot out to a certain distance, and they can pipe in sound waves through it, and actually make human voice sounds and commands.
Stop, or we will be forced to fire upon you.
I mean, that sounds pretty close to what we experienced.
We saw a host of different
Here's
devices
another-
and concepts today, all involving lethal and non-lethal use of directed energy or lasers. From a heat cannon you can strap to your M4 to take out drones or IEDs, to lasers mounted on big trucks, to ships, to even futuristic plasma that could shoot to a person and kind of talk to it, almost something out of a sci-fi movie. So there's a lot going on in the Department of Defense when it comes to lasers, a lot of interesting things down the pipe, a lot of things out in the field right now. Signing off, this is Todd South from Military.
So that's really interesting. In the area where the red star is, let me see. Oh, God, I'm so scared to move this thing. Okay. So where the red star is where the ranch sits. But you can see the Air Force Academy is right there. Peterson Air Force Base, Cheyenne Mountain, NORAD, Camp Carson, Fort Carson, Scrivener, and then there's Butte that has the largest military helicopter. So all in the Black Forest area and where this ranch activity is. Back in the 70s, the Air Force actually owned almost butting up to where that ranch sat. So kind of really interesting, heavy military in this area. I don't know if we're going to have time for this. I might skip over this. So Bill Waugh was the undersheriff. We had George Yarnell out there as well. I flew to Florida and interviewed Bill Waugh's widow, Jean, and his wife. They, in Dr. Leo Sprinkle's folders, this is his handwriting right here. It says, Bill Waugh, the undersheriff, wants to talk to someone, has seen ships going into the ground, boxes, mutilations. Nobody will talk. don't want an investigation, publicity, no stigma, credentials an important factor. John would go back. Now, John was one of the owners of the ranch, and he's a very interesting figure in all of this. NORAD colonel said bluntly to forget about it and to shut up. Air Force head has a directive to handle UFOs and Bigfoot. And even to this day, if you talk to people that are at the Air Force Academy, in the tree line, they see these Sasquatch creatures out there. So
Day and it was
this recording is Bill Wah's son and his widow talking about their connection and what his dad dealt with NORAD and the Air Force.
day and it was in the daytime, and a helicopter, one or two of them, took off from our back field. And the thing about helicopters, they make a lot of noise and throw up dust. But they took off. But I remember Dad got in touch with NORAD, and I think I rode with him over one time. But
You probably did.
he asked them to make sure to keep, the Army or whatever out of the county during this investigations, because they didn't want anything going on. When people saw this, I mean, you could tell a helicopter from something that does not make noise. And they had Stapleton Airport at the time. They would work with the tracking and the radar. They would send planes up flying around, and Stapleton Airport would tell them, it's like, you got an unidentified flying object directly below you.
With one of the ranchers, most of the ranchers had their own little plane, and they had notified the Air Force Academy out of Colorado Springs. They had notified Stapleton Airport to not have any flyovers at this particular time. And they were up and he was up in this plane. My husband was up in this plane. Right next to him came this, it was white, whatever it was, came up beside them, and they could see a black object sitting in the pilot seat. And they radioed Stapleton to find out who was there, and they said there's nothing on radar, and that thing took off.
I know one of the stories that he told me when they were up there, and it was Stapleton notified them that there was something unidentified flying next to him, and then it just disappeared off the screen, off the radar. It was gone. That's why the Dad talked to the people at NORAD Cheyenne Mountain, told them to keep the helicopters out of the county at the time, because, ranchers, they would
They'll
shoot
at them.
Yeah. So after the first season aired, I had a viewer reach out to me, and this is on the ranch property here. I don't know what you guys see there, but clearly CIA, like a message hidden in plain sight. I thought that was really crazy. CIA. Another hint that we had, again, is out of Dr. Sprinkle's files. It says Warren, his last name was redacted, from Camp Carson. Visits the ranch, felt something wrong, wouldn't go into the woods. Something took over his mind, made him walk towards the woods, would release him, and this did this to him 5 times. What does that sound like to you guys? It sounds like mind control. And they were seeing, there's many reports of these strange, mysterious boxes. And I encountered that box with the youngest son, Scott, and my mom's boyfriend, Jack. We were in the pickup truck driving. We got something out of an outbuilding. We're driving around the back in the Ponderosa Pines. He pulls the truck over. It sounded like bees, like an electrical sound. It was off the ground. And he's like, the box, get in the truck. We got in the truck, and I remember looking back, and that box was just gone. I don't know what these boxes are, but they've been seen other places as well. Something that I've been trying to connect together. So this kind of gets a little convoluted, but my mom was dating Jack. Jack was currently married to Betty. Betty and Jack never ever got divorced, but Betty was dating the other person who owns a ranch, John Duke. That's what they say his name is. But John Duke came from San Francisco and was part of the Air Force. And I feel he was part of the Air Force Defense Command Unit. And these are in the reports where they talk about, during the 60s, I took LSD. It was legal. I don't know about you guys, but I haven't heard of legal LSD. And after Contact in the Desert last year, we stopped and interviewed a widow and a daughter of a recently deceased CIA agent that lived in the Blanca area, which was crawling with feds. And they were telling us about experiments that were being done, what they called MF, which was a combination of all these different drugs, LSD included. They called it FM is what they called it, freaking magic. And I'm wondering if John Duke at the ranch was there experimenting with MK Ultra type of events. The more I'm learning, the more and more it makes sense that that was going on at the time. This is another very interesting case, November 11th, 1975, in Dr. Sprinkle's report, in the APRA report. It says, I understand that 2 National Guard interceptors went up, redacted out the name, that they were in pursuit of a UFO at night. So I ended up finding the original report about this interceptor crash. I've sent a FOIA request to Kirkland Air Force Base out of New Mexico, and I received this back. And I found it interesting that, of course, all the juicy parts are redacted out, but one of the causes, supposedly it was a instructor and a student. One of the causes of the crash was the instructor pilot misidentifies the rotating beacon of another aircraft as the student's aircraft. They never identify this other aircraft in all the transcripts, so it's really suspicious. This also is in the report. It said that this is the inside of an A-70. These are 2 A-70s that were scrambled out of Buckley, which is now Space Force. After sunset, the instructor noted that 8 of his cockpit instrument lights were inoperative. The airspeed, vertical velocity, radar, altimeter, clock, oil and fuel quantity, fuel flow, and turbine outlet temperatures. The cockpit utility light was used to illuminate these instruments. So during this encounter where they're supposedly in pursuit of a UFO, he loses instrumentation. We all have heard this before in other encounters, and even like in vehicles where, people lose their electronics or their engine dies or whatever. So I went and found and circled these 8 instruments that went out. Now, I don't know what they have in common, whether it's static electricity or they're all tied together. I don't know, but why they all didn't fail and just these 8, I think it's an interesting thing for somebody who knows more than I do to look at. Another thing in the report that I thought was interesting and kind of suspicious is that they had 218 rounds of live ammo on board these aircraft flying over residential, supposedly a student. I don't know about you, but I'm not overly comfortable about that. I don't know if that's normal or not. So that whole encounter was suspicious. In visiting the National UFO Historical Records Center, which is now in a public location, so anybody can go visit now in Rio Rancho, New Mexico. You just go to Dave's website and, tell them when you're going to be visiting. They're open on the weekends, and you can go down and check out this information yourself. But while I was there investigating the ranch, I came across another very interesting report from November 11th, 1975. From Falcon Bridge, Ontario. They're seeing multiple aircraft on radar. It's being observed by military men and women on the ground, many police officers, many civilians. And these things are ranging from 26,000 feet in altitude up to 72,000 feet in altitude. They finally decide to scramble a couple jets out of Selfridge, Michigan, over the Great Lakes. These UAPs were being spotted going 25 to 30 nautical miles over. And so that was the same day. So now we have jets scrambled out of Falcon Bridge, and we have jets scrambled over Elbert County on the same day, same year, same day. And on that very same day, Travis Walton is found. November 11, 1975, at 12:06, right after midnight, Travis Walton is returned to Snowflake, Arizona. And last year in Contact in the Desert, I'm talking to Travis and I'm telling him, like, gosh, what's going on November 11th, 1975? You were returned. And he goes, you know what else happened on November 11th, 1975? Over the Great Lakes, the Edmund Fitzgerald it sinks and 29 men go missing. I do believe that one of the bodies was recently found a few years back. But here's the earliest article I could find on Travis Walton, November 11th, 1975. And let's just watch this. It's about the Edmund Fitzgerald going down.
A freighter carrying a crew of 29 disappeared on Lake Superior during a severe storm last night, and so far, no survivors have been found. The freighter, the Edmund Fitzgerald, was transporting iron ore when it ran into high winds and 25-foot waves. Rebecca Bell has the story.
In the area where the Fitzgerald went down, a sister ship joined the search, but so far all that was found was an oil slick, life jackets, and an empty lifeboat. There was no sign of the 29 men aboard. Officials say the freighter was fighting gale winds and 25-foot waves. The Fitzgerald left the Burlington Northern Docks here at Superior, Wisconsin, Sunday afternoon with a cargo of more than 26,000 tons of taconite ore pellets. She was bound for Detroit. The huge freighter was last heard from shortly after 7 o'clock last night when one of its officers radioed a nearby steamer to say the Fitzgerald was taking on water and had lost 2 hatch covers. Shortly after that, the freighter disappeared.
Well, it's purely speculation, but with a following sea like that, you would consider the possibility of the ship broaching to and possibly capsizing, or else just breaking in half and splitting apart.
Even though the Coast Guard now considers the Fitzgerald lost, officers continue to plot the area where debris was sighted in a search for possible survivors. Officials, however, say it would be impossible to live more than 4 hours in the 49-degree waters of Lake Superior. Rebecca Bell, NBC News, Superior, Wisconsin.
So in going just recently, a few weeks back, I went back to the American Heritage Center and I found out that Richard F. Haynes Archives is housed there as well. And he really did research on exclusively pilot sightings, both military, commercial, private. So his collection is housed there. And I pulled the files for the November 11, 1975. Come to find out, NORAD was investigating from October 29th up till November 11th, a huge wave of pilot sightings across the United States. So again, this is a significant time. We even had an Eastern flight, passenger flight, that had encounters of 7 unidentified craft and that. So I love that, you know, we're starting to tie some of these together and connect dots across the country. It's really fascinating. Let's talk a little bit about the mutilations that were going on at the time. Again, this is where Linda Howe got her start. She was an investigative journalist in Colorado at the time. This is a little clip from her show, A Strange Harvest. This is Bill Waugh, the husband of Jean and Keith that I went and interviewed. So we'll kind of watch this little clip from Linda Moulton Howe's A Strange Harvest film.
Another law enforcement officer who saw strange lights back in 1975 and 76 is Bill Waugh. Bill was the undersheriff in Elbert County for 8 years, working with Sheriff George Yarnell. He retired in 1979.
Posseman and I was sitting out there one night. The sheriff was up in a plane, and I happened to look in the rearview mirror, and I saw this orange ball of light come up from the ground. So I nudged the deputy, or the posseman with me. We jumped out of a car, and this light came at us. It was up then, up off the ground, flying higher than the car. And they get up just about to the car, and they make a complete 90-degree right-angle turn. And in the cockpit, I could see 3 little lights, a red one and what looked like a white one, and either a green or a blue. One man looked out of his window at night just before he went to bed, and a horse was standing out there. He got up the next morning, sat down to breakfast, and happened to glance out, and the horse had been mutilated. Right there. It was in the summertime. They had they had a house and 2 trailers where people lived in them, and they all had their windows open. They had dogs around the place. No one heard any dogs barking. No one heard a thing. And that was right up by the house.
He, his son and his widow Jean were telling me that he had a big map in his, in the police department, and they were trying to pin and record the different mutilations that were going on. He was told by NORAD to downplay because the Colorado Bureau of Investigations, everybody was up in arms. They were arming themselves. There was a $10,000 reward at the time. So people were sky watching and trying to catch the people that were mutilating these animals. But he said on this big map, they would have a mutilation in Montana and one in Colorado or, Wyoming, Oklahoma. It was going on across all the Midwest. And they never really, it's never been solved to this day. And what's really interesting in doing Beyond Skinwalker, I've got to meet some of the locals now, and there are new cattle mutilations reports coming in as we speak. So it's still going on, not to the height of back then, but it is still going on. One of the craziest reports that I got on the mutilations was one of the people that grew up in Kiowa. She got married right out of high school, and she her husband was out on horseback checking the cows for calves. Her husband comes across a dead calf, and he said there were 4 cuts in a perfect square. The top of the fur was removed, but the skin was still there. He gets on the horse, goes back and gets my witness, and they come back in the pickup truck. And she said that took 25 minutes, and the calf had been mutilated, cauterized, organs removed. And then on Facebook, she's like, I found the photograph. So this is what the calf looked like when they came back with the cauterized, the blood drain, organs were gone, only horse tracks around the animal. The picture on the right, she sent that picture to me. She said that's what it looks like when a coyote jumps on and just tears at the calves. But the one on the left, she said they felt watched. It was eerie. They'll never ever forget about it. Something else that was going on at the time were these blacked out helicopters. These were some reports, helicopter menaces girls. There's a whole report right here called The Choppers and the Choppers. I have it on PDF. If you're interested, shoot me an email and I will send it to you. It's really fascinating to read it. But I came across, I'm sure many of you know who Richard Doty is. He was a disinformation officer that came in about 1977. I asked him at a conference, I said, were you aware of the Rocky Mountain Ranch? That was question number 1. He said that he was. Question number 2, I asked him about these menacing helicopters. Why on earth would, these helicopters be chasing, teenagers and kids on ranches? And he said it was a diversion, a distraction. So people would be focusing on that when something else was going on. Again, more evidence that perhaps military was up to no good out there. Again, here's the choppers and the choppers. I love this report because it really broke down like months of the year, how many of these reports are, days of the week, day sightings, night sightings. And you can see here the sightings, you can see Colorado there. It was just inundated with these strange helicopter sightings. Here's another interesting article I found, the mysterious blanket of metal found in field. There's a photograph of it. This was, like always, taken to a lab. Who knows what happened to that metamaterial in these fields, but something was dropping something from the sky. The craziest thing that ever happened to me, though, I was the Colorado MUFON's guest speaker coordinator at the time, and I invited this gentleman who wrote a book titled Flashbacks. His name's Sean Bartok. It is a pseudonym. That's not his real name. And in the book, he says he has a ranch in Castle Rock. Again, he didn't want to give away the true location of his ranch. But I found out it was only 14 miles away from the ranch of my childhood. And I'm sitting there in the 3rd row watching his presentation, and up pops a drawing. Now, the one on the left with like these tube things in the throat was the beings that they encountered and saw. And the adults at the Rocky Mountain Ranch, this was one of the original sketches from Dr. Sprinkles with the wrinkles, the heavy brow, the eye size, and these tubes that came out. And they're very, very similar. And what's really shocking is Sean says those tubes that are in the neck actually come out. So that was another one of his sketches with the tubes out. This was the sketch of the guy that was seen at the Rocky Mountain Ranch. Very strange looking. I actually did a composite video here. So here's the 2 sketches overlaid one on top of the other. Here we go. We did not know each other at the time. And some of the things he reported, even the strange snowless circles, are again almost identical to what was reported at the Rocky Mountain Ranch. I never saw ETs or anything like that when I was a kid, but in the report it stated that there were two types seen, the blonde, blue-eyed Nordic types, and these tubby guys, I call them, or Paul Giamatti calls them. When I did his interview, he dubbed them the tubby guys. But I was at the grocery store and I just happened to see this article and I thought, oh my goodness, what if Tubi Guys was some type of AI, artificial intelligence? And maybe that's what the conflicts was about. Maybe the Nordic types didn't want us to go down the route of AI. I don't know. I'm just speculating. But again, kind of strange. And are the I've had people come up at conferences and tell me maybe the boxes are connected to, these AI types. Maybe they're emitting some sort of frequency or sound that caused the cattle to be calm. And they have been spotted in other cases of animal mutilation. So I don't know if that's true or not. We're just speculating on that, but it's an interesting theory, I think. So what do some of these high strangeness ranches have in common? Why do we have this type of activity there? Something I took a look at was the magnetic anomalies map, and I'm just going to share this with you guys. So, if I can hear me. All these places are really highly magnetic, and they all have water features, whether it's aquifers underground, many river streams, there's always a water component, and there's certain geological, quartz crystals, gold, silver, and certainly that's the case here in Kiowa and Elbert County where this High Strangeness Ranch is. We're going to skip this little clip talking about the Palmer Divide, but they're very anomalous locations. David Pilates talks about it in his Missing 411, the UFO connection, these aquifers underground. So I looked at the aquifer maps. Even like the paranormal stuff, like the Stanley Hotel in Estes Park is highly magnetic. It has a water that runs under the Stanley Hotel and with the quartz crystals in that. So I just think it's like this magical combination, either that allows us to interact with the phenomenon or it opens up some sort of gateway or portal. And right where the ranch sits, I don't have a pointer, but right on that little corner there of Kiowa, we have two major aquifers coming together, the upper Dawson and the lower Dawson coming together right there. So the water tables are very unique in that area of the ranch. Let's kind of go behind the scenes a little bit on Beyond Skinwalker. Let's see. This is a picture of the ranch house from when I was a child, and it was really disorienting to me when I first arrived back on the property because I knew the house was in the same place, but it looked different. What they did is they kept the original house and they added an addition to the left and to the right and to the front, so it is in the same place. This was pictures of how it looked back when I was there. That barn is no longer there, but I was terrified of that barn as a kid. I talked to Nicole, who was born and raised on that ranch property, and she's had the shadow figures in her room. A lot of the hitchhiker phenomenon felt watched from the tree line and all that. So we had a lot of similar encounters. Same with the mom, Chris, who unfortunately passed away after filming season 1. She passed away a few months later. Of course, there's the radio experiment they did in the original part of the house where that disembodied voice. And what's fascinating is, when they aired that episode, there was so much more that happened that they didn't put in the episode. And I was like, why didn't they put that in the episode? But what they didn't show is Jer, the ham radio operator, kept trying to interact with something, nothing. So I repeated the responses 4 times. And why that is going on through the radio equipment underneath, almost like EVP sessions, we're getting transmissions or like EVPs talking about the Vietnam War, and then we got one that said, we're back. and just weird, creepy EVPs. And then later, Travis Taylor, inside the room where they put the crystal radio, he was giving a recording of these clicks, almost like SOS transmissions that were happening in that room where the crystal radio was. And I know they're taking a look at that, but none of that made the episode. I thought that was really interesting. The new episode that's coming out, we repeat that with my sister, and I can't give it away because, you know, it hasn't aired yet. But I can tell you that my sister got similar responses, but similar but different. And so I'm looking forward to seeing how they put all that together. It was really shocking, and it was surprised my sister. But here's a little clip from that. So it was interesting to me how they left a lot of the things that happened out of the episode. And I've had many people ask me, and it might be even one of your questions, like, for example, one of the first things reported back in my childhood was that strange hum, and then they happen to be out there with cameras and they pick up the hum. Like, I'm thinking, are they faking this? Like, you know, like even the radio stuff, I I never saw any evidence of any faking or rigging or anything like that. And I tell you what, I would be so mad if I ever found out they did anything like this, because this is my life's research, and it's impacted me and my family so much. So I certainly didn't see any evidence of that, but I did question it over and over and over again. I'm like, oh my gosh, how is this all happening? But it, you know, it was going on. And then the rockets, that was another interesting part of it. You know, the first little one they did behind the ranch house, kind of poking the hornet's nest, and then the big one came down and they had it packed with this equipment, and it never even recorded a launch, and it failed, and it fell right on that circle spot. So that was just really strange. I don't know if this is in the... So the scariest thing for me that happened when we were filming that first night, I was underprepared for the weather. We were supposed to be getting snow, but not to the degree that we had. It was just a completely whiteout blizzard. And I'm in my jeans and freezing cold. We went back behind the ranch house, and, you know, we were doing readings. That's where the footprints kind of showed up out of the snow. They came out of nowhere. It was like this blanket of snow and then these bipedal tracks, and then they disappeared like they went underground, came back up, then disappeared again. That next day we had off of filming, and my daughter came to Castle Rock, and we went to the outlet stores just to go shopping. I'm buying long underwear and warmer gloves and snow pants and everything, so I'm not caught off guard. And we went to Red Robin for a hamburger, and my back shoulder started hurting me. And we get up to the hotel room. I'm asking my daughter, you know, is there anything on my back? Well, this is what was on my back. I never leaned against anything. I don't know what this is. It almost looks like a handprint on my back. I let the producers of the show know right away. They did document and they did film it. It did not make the episode, which I was sort of relieved about because it's sort of embarrassing. But it was hot to the touch. It blistered. It scared my daughter to death. I think most likely is a radiation burn. I don't know. But certainly it was very unnerving. I know Travis Taylor has experienced similar types of marks at the Skinwalker Ranch. So again, my my daughter's like, go buy some candles. We bought a white candle. I always really try to protect myself now when I go back on the ranch property. Some questions that I have recently that I'm looking into, of course, is the aviary group, these people that are Mount Wilson Ranch, the Skinwalker Ranch. We know Bob Bigelow owned both Mount Wilson and the Skinwalker Ranch at the same time. We know Linda Howe was certainly aware of the Rocky Mountain Ranch, as well as Dr. Leo Sprinkle, who is in this photograph. We have Bob Bigelow, Stephen Greer, Bruce Maccabee, Leo Sprinkle. We have the Rockefellers here. Like, what are they doing? What are they trying to find out? And I questioned some of that as well. Here we go. We have Hal Puthoff, Kit Green, Russell Park out at the Mount Wilson Ranch. So looking at Project Stargate. Now, here's something I just recently put together. You guys are the kind of the first to hear this, but when this ranch stuff was going on that night of that disembodied voice, my mom, my sister, and I, we go back to our house. I remember going into the front door. I remember falling to the ground and I went like paralyzed and I couldn't speak properly. My mom and my sister are yelling at me, "What did you eat? What did you eat?" And I'm trying to say peanut butter and jelly sandwich and I couldn't. My sister takes me upstairs and I get my full blown tunnel vision, migraine where you're vomiting, that whole thing. So I get put on medication for like 3 or 4 months of different medications trying to get a handle on these severe migraine headaches that I'm suffering right after that experience on the ranch. My mom finds out from the Jack at work about this new program called biofeedback, and the guy who invented it, I still have my tapes from when I was a kid. In 1977, I'm put in this program, relaxation training by Thomas Bodinsky, PhD, who invented basically biofeedback training, which later became Project Stargate and other projects. And for a year during the ranch years, every week I'd go to this office building in the Denver Tech Center and get hooked up to things and raise and lower my temperature and all this. And I'm wondering if it wasn't connected to what was going on at the ranch. I'm piecing that together now, but it seems beyond coincidence. And at the same time, this is going on. My half brother has been institutionalized at Pueblo State Hospital. So in the reports, we know that in like MK Ultra, they were using people from state hospitals to do experiments on, and there's documents that stated that they were having homeless people and vagrants out to the ranch. Why? Why are they taking these people? And is it my brother from the state hospital that ties our family into what was going on at the ranch? I'm beginning to think so, and it's quite frightening. So recently, last year, I visited Jeff McBurney at Mount Wilson Ranch just so we can share information and talk about what's going on. He takes us up to the cave up there where he says first of all, if you kick the cave, it sounds hollow, and he hears sounds and bangs underground just like at the ranch. And one time he's standing back in the back of the cave and it sounds like a maglev train and his whole body's shaking. So that's really fascinating. That's always been a theory. Are they tunneling underground? I can't remember if I put the video in here. Yeah, here we go. Sounds hollow. Sounds hollow, doesn't it? I mean, it's fascinating. As we're going up there, we come across these tracks in the snow, not too far from the cave. Jeff's never seen anything like them. I don't know what they are. They don't have bear up there. They're not human. I don't know what it is. That's a little meter I put there for size comparison. But again, they kind of came up out of nowhere and disappeared. So here. So that was a strange encounter, and Jeff's never seen anything like that before. And even that weird yellow crime scene tape, he has no idea how that got there. So it was just it was a weird day. So I don't know how those are all connected.
Hey everybody, it's cold out here, so please hit that like button, hit that subscribe button. We really need subscribers, it'd be nice. And don't forget to hit that bell for notifications, because I have a hard time getting this thing out sequenced just right. And so you're gonna want to know when they hit the board. It should be every other week, but I'm trying to do better than that, so we'll just kind of have to wait and see. And
get on with it. Yes, get on with it.
Yeah, okay, all right, yep, got it.
Floored when season 1 came out and they didn't include all the work that they did with David Morehouse. David Morehouse is a remote viewer, and they ended up doing the biggest remote view project ever in the history of the United States right there on Rocky Mountain Ranch. And so what they did is they made this little bonus clip about it. I'm going to share the bonus clip. They kind of touch back with David Morehouse on season 2, but he spent over 2.5 hours going over what these 70 remote viewers from several different countries came to the conclusion of. I mean, he set up in the garage, he set up this PowerPoint thing, and my jaw was on the ground with what these remote viewers came up with in relation to the Rocky Mountain Ranch. So I'm going to share this clip, and then we're going to talk about David Morehouse and what they found. So this is just a photograph here, like just, David Carr talking to David Morehouse and that. I was really disappointed that they didn't include more of this into that episode, but what ended up happening, I don't know if you guys are familiar with Through a Glass Darkly, which is a wonderful podcast that I highly recommend, by the way. Sean Patrick Hazlitt does a wonderful job. And he had David Morehouse on for 3 of his episodes and specifically went through the PowerPoint presentation of the Rocky Mountain Ranch findings. It's literally 6 hours worth of information. He did 3 2-hour episodes. And I just kind of I want to share with you just some little clips from the 6 hours he did with Sean about what was, shared with the remote viewers from Rocky Mountain Ranch. So we'll go through these really quickly since we have time.
Just the variety of things that are seen and experienced here in this particular target area, in that whole area in general, because of the variety and complexity and differences in so many of the things that are perceived here, I think it's really a convergent point. I think it's a place where maybe many of these sky trails come together, which would follow along with much of the indigenous people's lore of this particular area, that there were portals and there were portals that opened and crossed, openings to other dimensions where craft come in, craft go out, some maybe one way, some not one way, but different. If this is like a Grand Central Station, right? If that's what it is, which I suspect that it is, you're going to see big varieties of life forms and vehicles and different times when it's open and different times when it's active and different times when it's not, both daytime and nighttime. It could be underground, part of it. It could be above ground. It could be separating above and below ground and then opens and combines the two. I mean, there are so many different possibilities, but this starts to explain why you get so much of this anomalous activity out there.
And this one here, they're talking about the life forms. I thought this sketch was in particular kind of interesting because we do know that there was police officers heavily involved. Colorado Bureau of Investigations was involved. Military was involved. And many of the remote viewers sketched that. They also sketched the 5 children, which was interesting. They just hit on so many things
that were perceived here. And I'm not talking possum and prairie dogs. These were humanoid life forms, but it was interesting just to see them and see each of the viewers work hard to try to figure out what the heck they were looking at, because they didn't know what they were looking at. And again, the detect, decode, and the objectify process causes them to go through that conscious decoding where the brain pulls up things that if it has an association to something, it can quickly grab that. If it doesn't have any association and it's struggling to package it as a decoded 4-dimensional lexicon, or imagery for you, it takes longer and there are struggles. But in this, I pulled out just for us to see the stuff that the viewers pulled out. Now, again, there were hundreds of images that were actually pulled out that all correlated and worked for this, but I can't take one alien life form and put 70 different variations of that on a slide to look at, because remember, we were trying to prepare this for hoping we could shoehorn this into Beyond Skinwalker Ranch, but this is where one of the reasons why it just became so overwhelming to them that they just did a small segment, left it out there just talking about the vertical sensing, and that's okay. This place we've been describing it as, and the viewers were describing it as, like this crossroads, this convergence points of invisible sky trails or, ley lines or power points or portals and vortices and things that are opening and closing. And so it's such a high, busy area that in my analysis, it makes sense that there's such a spectrum of life forms that are being described here. And in talking to Katie, who's been out there, it is that kind of a place. The numbers of different kinds of life forms that were present over the time we were there were huge. And from the ones that they called like white fuzzies to others that you might call a Bigfoot, to others that were greenish skin that sparkled, to others that had little small impish dark critter looking things, to grays, to you name it, right? They're out there. an interesting discussion about what this was. And it's an interesting piece of artwork on it, but it was just a sense of something really kind of foreboding, something dark and shadowed and hidden and maybe sinister kind of a sense. And clearly that depiction is there when you're looking at this. And that would make sense. It's not all emissaries and it's not all little friendly, dark life forms that are friends of grandmas. And we can't fool ourselves and think that it is, quite obviously, right? So yeah, I wanted to pull this in. There were a lot of sketches of things like grays, and there were a lot of sketches of the little dark creatures. There were variations of the sketches on the antelope people, on the antelope guy, and there were several cone-capped wearing things and lots of, as I said earlier, helmeted pilots, but clearly alien pilots.
Oh man. So there was just so many things that they hit on. They even had sketches of the box, and in the report they talk about that John and Jack were warned that these boxes were lethal, and supposedly they had a Sasquatch. They called them white fuzzies because they were more gray in color, but they had the white fuzzy or the Sasquatch creature walk towards the box and it was dropped to its knees. In other words, like, be warned that these boxes are lethal. So like I had mentioned, because of doing that series with the History Channel, I was able to meet some local people. And one of these locals is, he's a very credible guy, firefighter, a business owner. He's an elk hunter, and doesn't really want his last name out there because of his business and that. But he was sharing an encounter he had in November of 2021. He was out elk hunting. It was dusk. He was walking back to his pickup truck. This is right in the same area of the Rocky Mountain Ranch. He sees what he describes as a very metallic, shiny object sitting in this part of the tree line where he is very uncomfortable to go. And this is a big, tough guy. Like, and he's like, for whatever reason, that part of the forest I do not like. And he said it was 6 to 8 feet off the ground, and the top of it spun counterclockwise, the bottom spun clockwise, and he watches this thing for a few seconds and then it just vanishes. There's an orange glow to it. So here is my witness here. I had him take me out there to show me, and we kind of walked back. Now, interestingly enough, I think there might be an elk connection to a lot of these encounters. David Pilates talks about it. We have the Carl Higdon case in Wyoming from 1974, where he encounters a box as well. Carl Higdon did, and he's out hunting elk. It's a fascinating case. I recommend looking into it if you don't know much about the Carl Higdon case. But what's interesting, when we walk back there with our witness here, right where he sees this object, and I recreated it so we have a visual of it, but there's an elk path right under where this thing was hovering. So let's play this little clip here for you guys.
Like I said, I don't know what it was. I'm not saying it's a ghost. I'm not saying it's an alien. I don't know what it was. It could have been a drone. I have no idea. But I've never seen anything like it.
So you're hunting over here.
Yeah, up on that knob.
Walk us through what happened so we can.
Yeah, so I'm hunting up on that knob. It's probably 45 minutes before dark. My truck's parked over on where we came down the hill. So I started coming down, just walking this road.
So you're walking
on the road. Yeah, I'm walking on the road, and I turn over, and I just see this red glow in the timber, and I'm like, that's kind of weird. And then I see that thing spinning for 10 seconds, and then the glow went away, and I didn't see it anymore, and I got the hell out of here. That's all I saw. But it was
no sound.
Nothing. And what's weird is I could clearly see it was gears even from here. So it may have been bigger than what I'm thinking, because I could clearly see it.
You see how those trees and that, like,
yep.
Did it take up that whole space right there?
Yeah, so it was behind that little juniper, and then so half of it took up that space.
Half of it took up
Yeah, maybe, roughly. So it may have been a little bigger than I thought, but yeah, it was right there, and I could see it clear as day.
And you're still uncomfortable. I mean, you've never been back in that area.
Up where that thick timber is. I don't know why, but I've just never gone in there. And it's probably a really good spot for elk to be. But yeah.
We're getting some weird weather all of a sudden.
Yeah, it is. Yeah.
Yeah, and I don't know. I mean, it is what it is.
Let's walk a little bit.
Check it out.
So we walked back there, and again, there's a clear elk trail right under where that thing was hovering. Another recent thing, this is Carl. Carl is a multi-generational rancher out there. Some of the articles from back in the 70s were about Carl's cattle being mutilated, and he still has several hundred heads of cattle. And he also has cattle up here very close to where I live now, in Woodland Park, Colorado. And he shared with us that for 3 4th of Julys in a row, over by Red Rocks campground, there have been a mutilated cow found right after 4th of July. So we went and, kind of scouted out that area. On my YouTube channel, you can see that location where we go back and look at that. And it's under power lines. It's not like a helicopter could come and drop cattle in right there. So, very, very strange that on the 4th of July, just right there's been 3 mutilations in the same location. So you can imagine what we did last 4th of July. No activity, no mutilation last 4th of July, but still going on. This is a good time to talk about reopening the Snippy the Horse investigation. If you're not familiar with Snippy the Horse was the first nationally recognized animal mutilation back in 1967. I will be presenting on all the new information found. The APRO files went missing for over 35 years, and they were just recently rediscovered and brought to the National UFO Historical Record Center at David Marler's. So I've been back twice pulling all the information on Snippy the Horse, new photographs, new information, audio recordings, and we're kind of, we're finishing up the book. The book will be available at Contact in the Desert, but we'll have never before seen photographs of Snippy, the little gelding colt. He was a boy and he was named Snippy, not Lady. Lady was his mother, and now we have photographic evidence to prove that. And this is a witness here who says he was out there at the beginning of the Snippy event, and that's Carrie King, who is the grandson and is starting a new event called Dark Skies Event out there in the San Luis Valley. And this wonderful gentleman here is Bob King, who is Nellie's brother. He recently passed away, I think a year after that photograph was taken. But so hearing from family members of the King family has just been fantastic in this new book. We interview, Dave King and Carrie King and Bob King, and have never before seen photographs in that. So it's still a very active area out there at the San Luis Valley, and they are starting a new event. This summer will be the last closed event, but the following summer it's going to be open to the public. And every time we've gone out there in the San Luis Valley, we do see things in the sky that we can't explain. So it's still a very active area. Here's just something else recent. This was a MUFON case you guys might be interested in. I thought it was interesting. It's very, very close to our witness, Sean Bartok, in Franktown, where his actual ranch was located, not Castle Rock, but in Franktown, 14 miles away from the ranch. This was a case, they're riding their motorcycle, and they happened to take pictures of this beautiful sunset, and we get this strange, anomalous, almost box-like type of thing that appears on the photograph. It was a really interesting case that remains unsolved, and it was pretty similar to that, these obelisks that are spotted in Utah as well. In talking with another witness out there about strange things in Elbert County, this is a cave that is out there. I haven't been there personally yet, but she said it's a very well known. This is a very nomadic place of Native Americans in Elbert County with, the Kiowa, the Cheyenne, the Ute, the Pawnee, Comanche, Cherokee. And this was a sacred cave where people still leave offerings, and in that rock formation is this weird, strange looking gargoyle thing. So, we're still making connections. I want to thank you guys, and I want to take a lot of questions, and we can talk more about some things that I'm kind of tying together right now. But I do have a Rocky Mountain Ranch Research with Katie Paige YouTube channel that I started. So a lot of these connections, like I have one on the Mount Wilson Ranch talking with Jeff McBurney and the Howard Hughes connection and what they're pulling up underground there. I have an episode on the Carl Higdon where we went back to the actual location because I wanted to see if it felt the same as Elbert County, because there's definitely a feeling you get out there. The Snippy the horse interviews are on there. I just put one yesterday on the November 11th, and all the documents that I found on multiple cases from October 29th to that November 11th sighting. So I share that. And you can find those documents too on RockyMountainRanchResearch.org. I have documents there you can look at. And if you guys can subscribe to my channel, I'd really appreciate it. I'm trying to get that going. But I think now would be a really good time. I'm going to stop sharing my screen and I can take whatever questions and we can go deeper into some of these questions that I have. And really where I'm left, most people ask me, like, through all this research and document, where are you? Is this government or is this UFOs? And I am steadily in the middle ground where I think both things were happening. And I still think today, even looking at people, Hal Puthoff, Kit Green, Bob Bigelow, all of these players in the field, when we're having talks of disclosure and congressional hearings, I think there's still an agenda. There's people that are kind of puppet masters in what's happening in ufology. I don't trust it all because it's gone on for 40, 50 years of this kind of narrative that's spinning. So my advice is to use your own instincts, use your own research, and don't believe and don't drink all the Kool-Aid that's being said to you all the time, because I'm not so sure it's on the up and up. I think there's an agenda that's being played out. At least that's what my research is showing me. And I feel like part of the reason why we don't have a full disclosure is because there's a liability issue. I think unwitting people were, I don't want to call us victims, but I think people in state hospitals, people in communities, these small towns across the country were used and manipulated, why they were testing these different technologies. And there's a liability issue. They don't want that known. People will be pissed, including me. So, that's kind of where I'm at. I just think, and I'm not saying there's no such thing as actual UFOs or, UAPs, whatever term you like. It took me a while to get around to the Sasquatch and Bigfoot and all the rest of it, but certainly there's something unknown going on. I don't know which came first, the chicken or the egg. I think that the unknown, according to my research, one thing I took out of this presentation due to time, but in researching the provenance of the land, it was known as the Mulligan Homestead. And there was a guy named Dick Mulligan who was born and raised on that ranch property on Rocky Mountain Ranch. And if you search Dick Mulligan Winter Park Ski Resort, they talk about Dick Mulligan is this, Irishman born and raised on the ranch property. And he had the gift of bold exaggeration and storytelling. This was how he was known. And I'm thinking, well, if he was brought up there, he was probably trying to share with people all the strange things that were going on, and they're going, "Oh, Dick, you're such a BSer," and all this stuff. But it kind of says to me, in talking to old timers around that area, that stuff was going on well before the military showed up. So, for what it's worth, I think, the military came later. So anyway, I'd be happy to take questions.
Well, thank you, Katie. That was a really excellent presentation. I know we'll have a few questions for you. I did want to mention that if anybody wasn't able to write down Katie's website address, you can find that at northlandmufon.com as well. Very close to where you found the link for this meeting. So, Jared, do you want to start with questions in Grand Rapids?
Questions? Yeah, we got lots of questions here.
Oh, good. I love questions. It's my favorite part.
I'm going to turn this camera around.
Hi, Katie.
Hi. Oh, hi there, everybody.
Hi. Thank you so much for your presentation. You have a lot of dots to connect. Oh my goodness.
Yeah, it's overwhelming.
Yeah. Um, I just wanted to know who named it the Skinwalker Ranch. Where did that come from?
Well, the Skinwalker Ranch is actually another ranch in Utah that really gained recognition in like 1985, I believe. The Rocky Mountain Ranch really was reported in 1974, 75, 76, 77, and it was known. So if you search like Google, if you type in Clearview Ranch, it was known as the Clearview Ranch. And then I started calling it the Elbert County Ranch, just because it's in Elbert County, and I was really from the get-go, I was like nervous, like the people in the town of Kiowa, if they found out I was like telling, everything that happened there, the history that the townspeople would be mad at me. But then Beyond Skinwalker came around and dubbed it the Rocky Mountain Ranch. And so it's sort of out there now. And I'm like, whatever happens, happens. But I went with Rocky Mountain Ranch at this point because that got the most recognition. People, aren't going to search Elbert County Ranch. So it's now known as Rocky Mountain Ranch, but it was Clearview Ranch. And Skinwalker Ranch, I think, it's because of the hunt for the skinwalker, and the natives don't even like to talk about, what these skinwalkers are. They can morph into different creatures and that, and they were seen out there at the Skinwalker Ranch in Utah. I have not visited the Skinwalker Ranch, but I have visited the Blind Frog Ranch. I went out there and sat in the waters and everything, and I was really interested to know how like the land feels, because even to this day when I go to the Rocky Mountain Ranch, there's a sense of foreboding or a sense of being watched. It feels heavy in certain areas more so than others. But even in Trinidad, so there's the Miller Ranch. That's another episode on my YouTube channel. I did an interview with the Millers, a two-part interview with the Millers, and I got into the hitchhiker, high strangeness part of that. We didn't talk just about the mutilations there, but they also have that foreboding kind of sense of being watched. And I wanted to know if on the Blind Frog Ranch, if I felt that way. And I did not. The Blind Frog Ranch felt very kind of almost positive and good. It didn't have that heavy sense. And I'm curious if the Skinwalker Ranch would feel that way. I don't know. I've never been there. But I think that's where they got the name from, is because of the skinwalkers that are seen there, and these crypto creatures, which are also reported at the Rocky Mountain Ranch. In fact, something, when you read this briefing document, and you can Google it online, you can find the PDF of this. You could just type in multiple phenomenon on a Rocky Mountain Ranch, and you can find it and read it. But a lot of the things that were reported in the 70s, it's almost like it's identical to the Skinwalker. And I was like, it's, to me, the Rocky Mountain Ranch is the original Skinwalker Ranch. And I don't know what that's all about, but it is what it is.
Yeah, I had a question in regards to the radio transmissions. If you were familiar with the skull experiments, the documentary, I believe it's called the Afterlife documentary, the skull experiments.
Oh, I'm gonna write that down.
Yeah, so in that, one of the things that they cover is, I believe it's in Italy, there's a psychic with a radio, and there's this like weird voice that comes through, and it had been researched by skeptics and scientists where the radio was unplugged, and they even did stuff like videotaping it, the guy working with this thing, and they even took out the vacuum tubes. It's a very old radio, and it's got this really creepy voice that comes through there. I just seem very similar. Yeah. And like you can watch it on like Amazon Prime. You could rent that documentary. I think you might find that really interesting.
I might have to watch that tonight. I hope
There
it
you
doesn't. I mean, the thing about that night is the power was out in the house. So whatever that was, whether it was plasma ball technology, I mean, we didn't have power. So it wasn't like coming, if it sounded the way I remember it, it sounded like it just was piped in and it came out of every orifice of the house. So if I watch that tonight, I'm gonna start having nightmares. I'm gonna blame you.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, the name of that documentary is The Afterlife Experiments.
The Afterlife Experiments. Okay, I'm gonna check that out. That's gonna freak me out though, because I
Okay.
feel more comfortable believing it was us and not something we can't explain.
Sure.
Oh no.
Then I had another quick question about the boxes. If you could talk a little bit more about the boxes, like how big they are, what color. I mean, just
Right. The
never
box.
heard of this before.
The boxes fascinate me, and I didn't talk about it for a long time because it's just so weird. People are like whatever. But having seen one, so my encounter was a daytime sighting with the box with the youngest son Scott and my mom's boyfriend Jack. But again, I mentioned like the Carl Higdon case. Now Trey Hudson, who has the Meadows Project down south. I went out with his team a couple times, and on the flare camera, they have and it's really super sad. You see the 4 investigators kind of on the tree line, and being there in person. It's so important to visit places in person because it's pretty sparse. Like in one of my episodes on my YouTube channel, you can see that footage. I included in there, but you see them walking in and then they just disappear off the camera for a while. And then you see them reappear coming out of this box. And what's unfortunate is 3 of the people that entered that box are no longer with us. 3 of them have passed away. That scares me. But I don't know what these strange boxes are. Now, the ones that I witnessed and that we saw was more of a physical, box. Like it made a bee, like an electrical sound. It had lights that appeared to be on the inside of it. It was seen behind the ranch house. It was reported to interact with this white fuzzy Sasquatch creature. We saw it in the tree line behind the ranch house. The undersheriff says he's out on patrol. He sees this box on the ground, same description, and it's sitting next to a tree. He doesn't want to approach the box, so he goes back into the town of Kiowa, gets a posse sheriff. The 2 of them go back to where this box is, and he said it was as if the tree and the box appeared to go underground, and he saw this thing just kind of vanish underground. What's that? It just sounds crazy to me. I mean, it just sounds nuts. And so when I was just at David Marler's, he shows me this photograph. He's like, "Oh, I kept this aside for you because what it is, it's a bunch of these boxes floating in the sky that a witness had drawn." And then recently we have these accounts of what a circle within a box, right? That was reported with some of these pilots. So I don't know what these cubes or boxes are, and I think there might be different types of boxes. Some of them, I mean, certainly they're not aerodynamic, it's like a flying box, but we now and again through MUFON we get these box encounters. To me, the physical box that was seen at the ranch has something to do perhaps with the mutilations that were going on, or the ETs. I don't know. Another thing I don't talk a lot about, and I took it out of my presentation, I've shared it a few different times, but Dr. Leo Sprinkle did put me under for an hour and a half, so he did hypnotize me. It took me a week to listen back to that dang recording of that session. It was a cool experience just to be hypnotized by somebody that well known in the field. But what came out of it, I don't know what to make of it. I still don't. I don't consider myself like an abductee or anything like that. That being said, some weird stuff came out of that session where my voice changes into a little girl's voice, and I'm like, and I wasn't scared, and it was just creepy. It was really creepy and really weird. I had, you guys probably know who Sev Talk is. And at the time I was doing What's Up, MUFON What's Up Radio on KGRA with Krista Perno and stuff. And we had Sev Talk on as a guest. And she's talking about her marks and her experience. And on the show, she's like, well, they're like well-oiled machines. And I said, what did you just say? Because during my hypnosis, I talk about the ETs being well-oiled machines, just like Sev. Same exact words. It freaked me out. And that they were abducting people, and they had this hybrid program to get more feeling and emotion back, because it's sort of like the movie The Giver, where they have advanced so far and they're almost robotic in AI in nature that they lost individuality and creativity. And that's part of the reason this particular species is so interested in humans. That all came out under my hypnosis. It also came out in Seb's, the exact. So that whole thing is just strange. I do feel like whatever attached to me when I was younger has been with me my whole entire life. It's wherever I go, it doesn't matter. I will have like, paranormal things happen all the time, almost poltergeist type of things. I have a lot of people, that will, be concerned for me, like, oh my gosh, you have an attachment or something like that. And John Dover, when I was out in Phoenix, he's like, we typically don't do this, but because of your ranch and stuff, he took me through this ceremony, this cleansing ceremony, and kind of taught me how to protect myself when I go back onto the ranch property. For season 3, and I'll just share with you guys, I'm not necessarily supposed to talk about it in too much detail because the episode hasn't aired and I haven't seen it, so I don't know if it'll make it or not make it. But this last time we filmed, the time when my sister was there, right where the landing site is, they set up a table with all the equipment and we were going to do a sky watch. And it was chilly and we're all there getting ready to film. And I'm standing there. Hillary, who was the sound person for that show, had just put brand new batteries in everybody's microphones. And I'm standing there trying to tough it out, but it felt like 10,000 knives were coming down on my shoulder. I went completely pale and I just started shaking really bad. And so I'm like, I'm sorry, guys, something's wrong with me. At that time, my microphone went from 100% charge to 50% charge. I think it was Paul who sat me down on a cooler and I'm just shaking. Camera's rolling and he walks me back to the barn on the ranch. From the time I walked from the cooler to the barn, my battery went from 50 to nothing. So I had a complete battery drain. Everybody else's batteries were fine. My blood pressure was super skyrocketed high. I normally have a very low blood pressure. And they had to med me back to Castle Rock. I couldn't finish that scene. My sister was fine. Everybody else was fine. So I don't know what that was. I don't know I hope it doesn't make the episode because obviously I'm having a medical emergency. I'm shaking. I'm like, it was really, really bad. And, so I've had people like, with the hand mark on my back, and then that episode, I haven't been back to the ranch house at night. I don't want to go back at night. I will go in the daytime for short little bursts just to kind of recreate some of the experiments they did because I want to know it for myself. It's not that I distrust them, but I just need to see things for myself. That's just how I am. But the other thing that happened, that I didn't share earlier also is that night, when I had that thing on my back and it was freezing, snowing. I was so cold, I had fallen over the barbed wire and got my jeans all soaking wet. So after we were done shooting, they're like, well, why don't you sit in the pickup truck here and warm up? It's a heated truck. So I get in the truck and I'm sitting there. They all disappeared and went back to the barn. And I'm facing the tree line where I had all those terrifying encounters when I was a kid. I was like, where did everybody go? I was sitting in that truck for like 15 minutes. It seemed like an eternity because I was terrified out of my mind. And in the trees, I see a little pinprint of red light just in the tree line, just a red light. And I'm like, where the heck did everybody go? It was crazy, but eventually they came back and I went back to the barn. But that happened also out there. And another time we were walking back from the tree line without cameras rolling. We're just looking up at the sky and boom, a flash. It wasn't Starlink, it wasn't a satellite, it wasn't a plane. I don't know what it was. It wasn't captured, but we did see something just boom appear and disappear. I don't know if it was iridium flare. My old MUFON training coming in. But in that video too, where Greg talks about the line of lights that he sees, at first I thought, oh, well, that's a Starlink. But according to Greg, that happened way before the Starlinks were launched. So I'm not sure about that encounter he experienced as well. But it's really fascinating to me how the phenomena affects different people. And talking with, the ranch owners, Greg and his wife that passed away, Chris, at the time, she would see shadow figures and she had paranormal things happen to her. So did the daughter, Nicole, but Greg did not. And but now when I go visit and I talk to Greg, since his wife has passed and since he's kind of more open to this, he's having things happen all the time. In fact, he said he has skylights in his bedroom and right by where that room was where we had that night, and a big bright light shines down into his skylights. He's like, it wasn't a helicopter, it wasn't a plane. I don't know what it was. I'm like, Greg, what do you mean you don't have anything happen to him? So I think it's interesting how consciousness and our expectations play a role in all of this, because now that he's awakened to it, things are starting to happen, or he's starting to take notice of things happening to him. So that's kind of an interesting thing to note as well. And even talking to the Millers on the Miller Ranch, I asked him about other ranches. Are they getting their cattle mutilated to the amount that you guys have had? And they're starting to speculate that in the last 2 years, the Millers got rid of all their cattle because mutilations were happening so often. Now their neighbors are starting to be victims of the mutilations. But he thinks that an important equation to whose ranches are being targeted for mutilations has to do with the people that own the ranch. In other words, there's ranchers that never get affected by it. It's almost like you have to be tied into the phenomenon, because they get the hitchhiker phenomenon too inside their house, and they're getting the mutilations. So he feels like the ranchers, the people that own the property, are an important part of the equation of the mutilations. And I just thought that was an interesting take, and I had never heard that before.
Awesome, thanks. Anybody else got any questions here? Yep. Okay, one more here.
Hi, you mentioned that you're living up in Woodland Park now.
Mhm.
My wife and I last April, we stayed a week out there. We hiked through the mountains, about 30 miles, beautiful area.
Thanks.
About halfway up Pikes Peak, I found a single footprint on the backside of the mountain there. It was about 16, 17 inches long.
Wow.
I'm curious to know, are you in tune with the Bigfoot activity that's going on? You want to talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, I didn't touch on that for a long time. Just, there's so much to all this. But Jim Myers has the Sasquatch outpost up here in Bailey, Colorado. And to come to find out that the Bigfoot world is as big, if not bigger, than the UFO world. But there's so many encounters out here. And back at the ranch, they were known as white fuzzies. And Bob Solis wrote a letter to me about Malmstrom and what they were doing out there in Malmstrom. They were seeing these same type of Bigfoot creatures out there as they were at Rocky Mountain Ranch at the time, and they were putting airmen and women under like lie detector tests, and they were taking all these reports on the Sasquatch creatures. And he sent a picture of the ones up in Malmstrom at the time as the Rocky Mountain Ranch. They're almost identical. But I have one Bigfoot encounter that I had. I had 8 acres up in Bailey, Colorado, which is really close to Jim Myers' Sasquatch outpost, just 7 miles down the road. And I had never encountered anything with a Sasquatch before, but it was dusk. I was sitting there on the back patio waiting for my husband at the time and my daughter to show up. And we had just put in an 8-foot tall water feature. So it was this beautiful water sound. And I'm sitting in the swinging chair and I hear crash, crash, like the tree knocks. And then I smelled the worst thing it smelled like a dead body. It was the worst smell, freaked me out. I was really scared. I went into the cabin and waited for my daughter and my husband to get there. And the next morning we went out and we were looking for, hair or footprints or anything. But I think I've smelt a Sasquatch. I've never seen one, but yeah, I believe they're real. And out here in this area, especially where you're talking about by Pikes Peak, there's a lot of encounters and sightings of Bigfoot out here for sure, just right behind Pikes Peak. So I believe there's something to that. And
Great.
I kind of feel like they're interdimensional, or maybe they're the ETs themselves. I know Stan Gordon wrote a great book, the Pennsylvania. Oh, what is this book called? Hold on, it's this one right here.
Something invasion or something like that?
Silent Invasion. Yeah, this one right
Yep.
here. Silent Invasion is a good one where they talk about the Ohio Pile, Pennsylvania encounter, which is very similar to the ranch as well. So these hotspots are all over the world, and it keeps me going to kind of figure out why, what do they have in common. But in this book, and even my sister, she doesn't like to talk about it a lot, but she went to the high school prom in Kiowa during the height of all this high strangeness, and they went to the ranch after the prom, and she will tell you, like, she felt these Sasquatch creatures were directly connected to the UFOs, whether they're bodyguards or they have something to do with the mutilated animals. But that was her feeling, like they were connected. And I know that Stan Gordon talks about that as well. And I think there's something to that. I think some of them might be connected to the ET.
Awesome, great. Anna, you got, I'll let you go ahead and take it. I know Ivor's got a question too, but go ahead and take over there, Fargo.
Sure, I have one question, and then I'll see if there's anyone else here that has any questions. Katie, are you familiar with the Blythe intaglios? I believe that's how it's pronounced.
The what?
The intaglios in Blythe, California.
No, I'm not.
So when I saw the sketch of the ETs, the ones with the ribbed necks, I was really struck at the similarity between the figures at the Blythe intaglios. So if you haven't heard of it, you'll definitely want to take a look at it.
Okay.
Very, very similar beings.
Can you like, what would I look up if I want to find?
You could probably misspell it and it'll come up, but it's in Blythe, California, Blythe, I think it is. And intaglios, Intaglios, I believe. Spelling's not my best subject.
Yeah, me neither. Okay, so the ETs are similar to the ones reported at the ranch?
Yes, I would take a look at that. There's some interesting features of those ETs and those sketches that has a striking resemblance to the intaglios there.
That's interesting.
So yeah, I found that interesting. I wasn't sure if you were familiar with them or not. So
No, I haven't heard of that, and I definitely will check that out. I've had other people comment that, the shape of the thing, something the History Channel won't touch on, and I don't like to talk about it either, is the spiritual side of things or the demonic side of things. And I've had people comment that, what is his name? Oh, why am I'm drawing a blank on it. He drew a sketch of Lamb. Why can't I think of his name? He was,
Alistair?
yeah, that's it, Aleister Crowley. Thank you, Aleister Crowley. I was drawing a blank.
Someone
He
here in our audience.
drew that sketch of Lamb, and he kind of looks like these guys as well. And what really, and again, I don't like talking about this publicly too much, but this is a small group. Why David Morehouse was there, and we're sharing with Greg and Chris are pulling out all the original pictures from when they purchased the ranch, which, by the way, they purchased it. It sat vacant after our family left it, or my mom's boyfriend's family left it. It sat vacant, and then they bought it, and they've been there ever since. So it went straight from our people to them. And so he's pulling out original pictures of the house and all this stuff, and which I love because that's what I remembered. And he's like, well, when we bought this property, there were stickers, demonic stickers in each of the windows. And there was an altar in the back of the ranch house where they were doing ceremonies of some type. And it wasn't my mom's boyfriend. He went on to become a police officer and was, well respected. But Betty and that other character, John Duke, the one I suspect might have been MK Ultra, they were into some dark stuff. And I was having like flashbacks and memories and that, and I know I'm almost done. And so I'll be down in a minute. But I was having like memories of this stuff, and not all of it was good. So there's part of that, and they had cameras rolling, and I just said, I don't want this on film. I don't want any of this out there. And then later, David Carr came up to me, said, well, History Channel won't go down that rabbit hole anyway. But there is that part of it I'm looking at as well. I have letters from Betty, who was living there, about writing in Latin and just weird, dark things. So I'm really, I think it's really important to put that love and light around you, and it's not all like good things. And I question the shadow beings and those kind of things that were happening. So that's a part of the Rocky Mountain Ranch that doesn't get talked about, and I get uncomfortable talking about it, but it is part of the history there.
Interesting. Any other questions here in Fargo? We do have another question. I'll let him come up and ask it.
Hi, thank you for the great presentation. It's been a lot of fun listening to you. I have a quick question, and I know it's been a long time, 50 years since about that time when you heard the sort of disembodied mechanical voices. Do you associate that in your memory with any particular event or sighting that you had seen? Like any one thing that it maybe might have been warning you not to tell people about? And second part of the question is, before you heard the voice, you and your family, had you told anyone about what you had seen?
No, me and my sister. So my sister's 6 years older. My mom and her boyfriend Jack, like, you don't talk to your friends about it. We even created our own little language together, kind of like Pig Latin, where we would talk. We'd hear the adults whisper about things all the time. But for those 3 years, it was, we were experiencing things at the house, but it was a very scary, like, we would try to overhear, like we'd hear about police being called or mutilations being done, but I never put it all together until 15 years ago when I started digging at it. It was just like fractured memories of scary things, if that makes any sense to you. I don't know if I'm answering your question right. But it
You're very
wasn't,
young, so it makes sense. Yeah.
yeah, there was so much going on at the time. I couldn't piece all the pieces together. A lot of it I didn't even connect together. Um, you know, and the more and more I uncover and the more and more I learn, I have more questions than answers, but I'm, it's still, no, I don't know what that was. And I don't know if it was connected to one particular thing. I didn't even, like, back in those days, I didn't know about UFOs or aliens too much. I knew my grandfather had had a sighting investigated by J. Allen Hynek in the early 60s in Lake Geneva, Wisconsin, over Lake Como. So I had heard about my grandfather sighting. He was amazing. He was a Navy person. My dad was Navy. So we had sightings in Illinois and Wisconsin. So it wasn't like it was my first time hearing about UFOs or whatever. And then, of course, the funniest thing, I think, for me personally, in 1977, the movie Close Encounters of the Third Kind comes out. And I'm thinking this is a documentary. 'Cause I'm like, oh, yeah, look there's the mutilated animals and things. So yeah, I just laugh at that because I think it's kind of funny that I'm like, oh, maybe not everybody else saw it that way, but I certainly did.
Thank you. Thank you very much. One other quick question that I had. I was kind of surprised to hear you mention Richard Doty's name. I think he worked for the CIA as a disinformation agent. And I know you're kind of on the fence between the phenomenon, that you experience. Is it the government? Is it NHI, aliens, UFOs, whatever? As far as Richard Doty goes, did he contact you or did you contact him?
He was speaking at a conference in Laughlin, so I kind of cornered him and asked some questions. And I'll be speaking with him again in Albuquerque this spring, in April. There's a conference in April. So he will be there again. So I need to write down a list of questions because I'm going to corner him again. And I don't know what to think about him coming out now and he's being all truthful. Like, really? I don't know what I think about that.
Yeah.
You know? Mm.
Well, thank you. Appreciate it.
Well, thank you guys so much for having me.
Strawberry. All right. actually not too bad. Not at all. You're still here. Well, okay, then please like, please subscribe. We're trying to grow our channel as much as we can. There's another video that's going to pop up on here somewhere. Hit that and watch that too. Appreciate it. Thanks. The insect man?